Hello, my friend. Imagine this, you're just 20 years old, standing at the edge of a vast, restless sea. Behind you lies everything familiar, your home, your family, the only world you've ever known. Ahead of you stretches the mightiest empire the world has ever seen, an empire that has crushed every challenger for centuries. Most people would turn back. But you look out across those waves, take a quiet breath, and say with unshakable certainty, I'm going. And I won't stop until it's done. Who was this young man? His name was Alexander. And today, we're stepping back more than 2,300 years to walk beside him on one of history's most extraordinary journeys. Stay with me, this is a story about courage, curiosity, and what happens when someone refuses to accept limits. The year was 356 BC in a rugged northern land called Macedonia. It was a place of steep mountains, thick forests, and harsh winters that tested every soul who lived there. The people were tough, practical, and known above all for their fighting spirit. Into this world a boy was born, and from his first days, he seemed marked for something larger. His father, King Philip II, was a masterful leader who had transformed a small, struggling kingdom into a formidable power. With a newly disciplined army, Philip had united much of Greece under Macedonian strength. He dreamed big for his son. Alexander's mother, Olympias, was equally passionate. She looked at her boy and saw destiny written across his life. She told him again and again that he was meant for greatness beyond anything the world had witnessed. And young Alexander believed it with his whole heart. Even as a child, he carried himself differently. While other boys played freely, Alexander was serious, watchful, and always thinking about what was possible. When his father returned from a major victory and the palace rang with celebration, the young prince didn't join in the cheers. Instead, he quietly told his companions, "My father is leaving nothing for me to conquer." That kind of thought from a boy barely 7 or 8 years old tells you everything about the fire already burning inside him. When Alexander turned 13, his father made a decision that would shape history. He brought in the greatest mind of the age, Aristotle, to become his son's teacher. Aristotle opened doors to science, medicine, geography, literature, and the art of clear thinking. More than any facts or skills, he gave Alexander a lifelong love of learning and the habit of asking deep questions. One book in particular captured the young prince's imagination, the ancient epic The Iliad, filled with tales of heroes, bravery, and the cost of glory. Alexander carried his personal copy everywhere he went, even sleeping with it under his pillow alongside his sword. That love of stories and ideas traveled with him for the rest of his life. But Alexander was never just a student. He was a natural warrior with sharp instincts. There's a well-known moment from when he was about 10 or 11 that perfectly captures who he was. A horse trader brought a powerful, spirited stallion named Bucephalus to the royal court. The animal was magnificent but completely wild, no one could ride him. Rider after rider was thrown. King Philip was ready to send the horse away. Then young Alexander stepped forward. "Let me try," he said. The adults around him chuckled, but he approached the horse calmly. He had noticed what others missed: the stallion was terrified of its own shadow dancing on the ground. So Alexander gently turned the horse to face the sun, letting the shadow fall safely behind them. He spoke softly, stroked its neck, and swung himself onto its back. Bucephalus stood steady, then began to move with grace and power. Philip watched with tears in his eyes and said, "My son, you must find a kingdom big enough for you, and Macedonia is too small." From that day on, Bucephalus became Alexander's trusted companion, carrying him across thousands of miles and countless battles for more than 2 decades. Then, without warning, everything changed. In 336 BC, when Alexander was 20, his father was assassinated at a public celebration. In a single moment, the young prince became king. Many neighboring kingdoms saw an opportunity. They thought a 20-year-old ruler would be easy to overthrow, and several cities rose in rebellion. Alexander didn't hesitate. He moved his forces with remarkable speed, striking north, south, and east before his enemies could organize. One by one, the rebellions were brought under control. Greece was stabilized. The world began to understand this was no ordinary young ruler. With his home secure, Alexander turned his gaze east toward the vast Persian Empire, the superpower of the ancient world. Stretching from the shores of the Mediterranean all the way toward India, Persia was rich, ancient, and seemingly unbeatable. In the spring of 334 BC, at just 22 years old, Alexander crossed the sea into Asia with roughly 40,000 soldiers and began one of history's greatest campaigns. He won his first major clash at the river Granicus, then moved down the coast, freeing Greek cities that had lived under Persian control. His men were inspired not just by clever tactics, but by the sight of their king fighting at the very front, sharing every danger with them. Alexander was wounded more than once, yet he kept rising. That courage forged a deep loyalty among his troops. When he reached Egypt, the people welcomed him as a liberator. They crowned him pharaoh, and Alexander, moved by the land's ancient wisdom and beauty, showed genuine respect for their traditions. There, at the mouth of the Nile, he founded a new city, Alexandria. That single decision by a man in his early 20s created one of the greatest centers of learning the world has ever known, a place whose name and influence still echo today. But the ultimate test waited on the plains farther east. At Gaugamela, Alexander faced the full might of the Persian army under King Darius III. Though badly outnumbered, he studied the battlefield, spotted a weakness in their lines, and at the perfect moment led a daring charge straight through it. The Persian formation shattered. Darius fled. The greatest empire of the age had fallen, and the man who brought it down was not yet 30. Still, Alexander's drive did not fade. He pressed onward through mountains and unfamiliar lands into Central Asia and eventually India. His soldiers had marched and fought for years, thousands of miles from home. They had faced harsh deserts, high passes, and exhausting campaigns. At the Hydaspes River, they met a formidable Indian king named Porus, who brought war elephants into battle. Once again, Alexander adapted, found a way, and secured victory. Yet when he looked toward the next horizon, believing the edge of the known world lay just beyond the next river, his exhausted men finally stopped. They had given everything, 8 long years, endless miles, and many dear friends lost along the way. For 3 days Alexander tried to inspire them onward, speaking of glory and shared dreams. But this time the army would not move. For the first time, he met a limit he could not overcome with courage or strategy alone. With a heavy heart, he gave the order to turn back. The return journey was difficult. Many soldiers fell to illness and the toll of the long road. Alexander himself grew weary and sick. In 323 BC, he reached the great city of Babylon. Even then, his mind was already planning future voyages and explorations. But a sudden fever took hold. For 10 days he lay in his bed as his loyal soldiers filed past in quiet lines, many with tears in their eyes, to say farewell to the king who had led them so far. At the age of 32, Alexander passed away. His empire did not survive intact. His generals divided the lands, and new conflicts arose. Yet something far more lasting remained, his legacy. By carrying Greek language, ideas, philosophy, and culture across a huge part of the known world, Alexander created connections that endured for centuries. The cities he founded became hubs of knowledge and trade. Greek became a common tongue of learning. The great library at Alexandria preserved and shared wisdom that shaped generations to come. Even today, when we study mathematics, science, or philosophy, we stand on ground that Alexander helped open. He was not a perfect man, no great figure in history ever is. Ambition brought both brilliance and hardship. But what stays with me most is his relentless forward motion. When the path grew steep, he kept going. When the goal seemed impossible, he kept going. When the unknown stretched before him, he kept going. Stopping was simply not in his nature. And that, my friend, brings me gently back to you. Your own journey may look very different. Maybe learning English sometimes feels like crossing a wide river or climbing a distant mountain. Some days the words don't stick, the sentences feel tangled, and the finish line seems far away. But here you are, still listening, still trying, still moving forward. Every lesson you finish, every new word you understand, every conversation that becomes a little easier, that is your own quiet victory. Alexander never reached the very edge of the world he dreamed of, but he traveled farther than anyone before him. And you, right now, are already farther than you were yesterday. That progress matters. Be proud of it. Thank you for sharing this journey with me today. If this story touched you, drop a comment and tell me, if you could ask Alexander one question, what would it be? I'd love to hear your thoughts. If these stories are helping your English, please give the video a like and subscribe so we can keep bringing more of them to you. There are so many more lives, lessons, and adventures waiting. Until next time, my friend, take care of yourself, keep moving forward, and never stop learning.